Some Tuesdays have a way of announcing themselves. Flat tires, missed alarms, a spilled coffee on a white blouse. But this one was quiet. Too quiet. I should have known something was wrong by how smooth everything felt on the surface. My son, Leo, actually remembered to pack his lunch. The train was on time. Even the front desk guy, Curtis, who usually grunts instead of saying hello, gave me a cheerful, "Good morning." And that's how you know the universe is setting you up. The email hit my inbox at 8:03 a.m. sharp. All hands meeting at 9. Attendance required. No subject line, no agenda. Just that sterile little block of text sitting there like a landmine. I stared at it for a beat, then exhaled slowly. Our CEO, Dylan Mercer, didn't require anything unless it was going to sting. I made my way to the 17th floor conference room. The muffins were stale, the coffee was worse, and people shuffled in wearing the same uncertain half-smiles I'd seen during previous layoffs and reorgs. I took a seat near the middle, notebook open, trying to look composed. After 9 years at this company, through mergers, pivots, and enough rebranding buzzwords to fill a dictionary, I'd learned how to hold my mask in place. Dylan strolled in right on time, all charm and tailored arrogance. He wore that smug, rehearsed expression that always made me think of someone selling a cult, not a company strategy. He didn't even wait for the room to settle. "Thanks for joining on such short notice," he began, his voice smooth as glass. "We're at a crossroads, a moment of transformation. Cue the buzzwords: agile, streamlined, culture alignment, disruption." He spoke like we were lucky to be in the room, lucky to breathe the same air while he charted our future. Behind him stood 2 HR reps, and, of course, Ben, the smug SEO lead who'd been here all of 3 months and somehow already acted like he owned the place. Then came the folders. They were passed out one by one, discreetly, like poison slipped into a drink. Mine landed in front of me without a word. I opened it, and my breath caught. 60%. Not a typo. Not a temporary adjustment. Not a discussion. Just a printed document, cold and final. Effective immediately, your compensation will be revised to better align with evolving departmental structures. I read it again. And again. As if the numbers might morph into something more humane if I blinked enough. I looked up. No one met my eyes. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching inward. Dylan spoke again, softer now. "We know this isn't easy, but these changes reflect our commitment to performance equity and future-forward growth. We value what you bring, Beatrice." I turned toward him slowly. 60%, I said, voice steady. He nodded. The kind of nod that says this isn't personal, it's just math. "I need 10 hours, I replied. Dylan tilted his head. "Excuse me?" 10 hours, I repeated. "To consider." "Of course," he said quickly. "Absolutely. Take the time you need." The room resumed its low murmur, like a hive that didn't know whether to keep buzzing or collapse. I closed the folder carefully, stood up, and walked out. I held it together all the way to the parking garage. Once inside my car, I crumbled. It wasn't a cry. Not at first. It was more like being crushed from the inside, like every breath hurt a little more than the last. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My chest ached. 60% meant losing our apartment. It meant Leo wouldn't get to finish 4th grade at the only school where he'd ever felt safe. It meant late-night grocery math and pretending the lights were flickering because of a storm and not an unpaid bill. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. Leo's picture was clipped to my dashboard. One of those cheesy school portraits where the lighting makes every kid look like a floating head. He was missing a tooth and smiling so hard you could see his gums. He called me his supermom. He didn't know that supermoms sometimes got destroyed in conference rooms by men who'd never worked a late shift in their lives. I sat there sobbing quietly until the tears ran out. And then I remembered something. Last year, a recruiter from Onyx Brand had reached out. They were Dylan's biggest competitor, Sleeker, smarter, still small enough to notice loyalty when they saw it. I hadn't followed up. I was loyal. Foolishly loyal. But loyalty only works when it goes both ways. That night, after I tucked Leo into bed and whispered a bedtime story with more hope than I actually felt, I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and made the call. Onyx answered on the second ring. I introduced myself, and the voice on the other end said something I'll never forget. "We were hoping you'd call. We were hoping you'd call." I sat in the quiet kitchen with that single sentence ringing in my ear like a bell that wouldn't stop echoing. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked around, at the chipped paint on the wall near the pantry, the drying art project Leo left on the counter, the silence of a life I had fought tooth and nail to build. I clutched my phone tighter, because before I could open my mouth to answer, everything that had come before this moment came flooding back. I hadn't meant to end up in tech. I certainly never thought I'd lead a team, let alone a department. But life has a funny way of pushing you in directions you never expected, especially after you lose everything. Leo was just 2 when my marriage collapsed. I still remember the sound of that door slamming behind my ex as he walked out, leaving me with rent I couldn't afford, a toddler who needed round-the-clock care, and a bank account that held $46.27. Divorce wasn't a shock. He'd been gone in every way that mattered for months. But the finality of that silence when he left, it broke something in me. I couch-surfed for a while, then landed in a friend's converted sunroom. The walls were glass, the heat was a joke, and Leo had to sleep beside me in a pack-and-play that creaked with every breath he took. I applied for jobs during nap time. I wrote cover letters at 3 in the morning. I taught myself HTML on a busted laptop while balancing a bottle in one hand. That's when I found the listing. Fast-growing digital startup seeks content strategist with a hunger to build. I laughed when I read it, mostly because I hadn't eaten anything but instant noodles in 2 days. I applied anyway. The startup was called PulseSpark. No one had heard of it. Their website was glitchy, and their LinkedIn page had maybe 9 employees listed. But the name stuck with me. It sounded like a heartbeat trying to break through noise. I went in for the interview with a secondhand blazer, a stained tote bag, and a 3-page resume that was half freelance gigs and half sheer desperation. But desperation, it turns out, can be persuasive. So can honesty. I told them the truth, that I wasn't just looking for a job, I was looking for a way back to myself, that I understood what it meant to build something from scratch, that I knew how to make stories resonate when you didn't have money, clout, or a team. All you had was time and hunger. They hired me the next day. At first, the office was just 1 floor of a co-working space above a smoothie bar. We had no budget for paid ads, so I turned our blog into a story engine. I wrote 18 articles in the first month alone. When one went viral, it brought in our first 10,000 organic users. I didn't sleep much. Leo got used to having dinner on the office couch when I had to stay late. He once drew me with a laptop for a face and called it "Work Mom," but he never complained, and I never stopped. Year 2, we moved into our own space. I had a desk, then an office, then a team. I trained interns, led strategy meetings, built brand guides, rewrote launch plans in real time when developers missed deadlines. I poured myself into PulseSpark because it had given me back a version of myself I thought was gone. By year 5, I was director of brand strategy. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were growing, fast. I negotiated our first B2B partnerships. I helped shape our voice. I pitched to investors when our founders froze in boardrooms. Leo and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony, and every Friday night, we sat out there with pizza and juice boxes, looking at the city lights and pretending we were rich. And then Halston Corp bought us. They promised it wouldn't change anything, that PulseSpark would keep its soul, its people, its innovative DNA. But anyone who's been through a corporate acquisition knows those promises have expiration dates. The layoffs came in waves. First the finance team, then half of HR. Next, the culture committee, and everyone who remembered the names of the office plants. My team held on, barely. I had to fight for every position. I absorbed roles they eliminated. I trained my own replacements under the guise of process optimization. The perks disappeared. The laughter faded. People started bringing headphones to meetings. 6 months after the ink dried, Dylan Mercer arrived. Polished, charismatic, dead-eyed. He didn't ask what we did. He asked why we weren't doing it faster. He talked about vision, like it was a product, and efficiency, like it was morality. And then he brought in Ben. Ben, with his spreadsheet smirks and casual cruelty. Ben, who referred to legacy campaigns as digital fossils. Ben, who said I was too context-dependent in a strategy meeting, like understanding nuance was a weakness. Still, I stayed. I stayed for my team, for Leo, for the hope that maybe I could protect what we'd built until the storm passed. But the storm wasn't passing, it was just beginning. When they handed me that folder, when I saw that 60% cut spelled out in emotionless font, it didn't just feel like a betrayal, it felt like an erasure. Everything I'd built, every late night, every lunch skipped, every birthday I FaceTimed from the office bathroom. Gone. Because some VC-fueled robot in a tailored suit wanted leaner margins. I looked back at the phone still pressed against my cheek. "Beatrice?" the voice repeated, gentle now. I cleared my throat. "I'm listening. We'd love to discuss what a transition might look like," they said. "We're not offering pity. We're offering opportunity. Because we've watched your work. And frankly, we've been waiting for the right moment to call." I leaned back in my chair. The cracks in my chest hadn't sealed, but something had shifted. "I can meet tomorrow," I said. 10 a.m. works. "We'll send a car." After I hung up, I just sat there. Not in victory, not in anger, just stillness. Because after years of holding everyone else up, I had finally put my hand out and found someone waiting on the other side. The collapse didn't begin with a bang. It started with a spreadsheet, a silent change in a cell, a deleted row, a reclassification of something that once had a name, a heartbeat, a purpose, turned into a number in someone's restructuring model. After Halston Corp acquired PulseSpark, the first month felt like a temporary storm, like something we'd ride out, then emerge from, drenched but intact. They promised minimal disruption, preservation of core teams, strategic continuity. Lies always sound like reassurance when you're desperate to believe them. The real shift began with the phrase, departmental recalibration. On a Thursday morning, we received a slide deck in place of our usual company-wide update. There were pastel charts and bullet points with terms like agile repositioning and talent streamlining. No one said layoffs. No one needed to. By the following Monday, 2 people on my team were gone. No explanation. No goodbye emails, just blank nameplates on their desks and login errors when I tried to tag them in Slack. I asked HR what happened. "Realignment of resources," they said too quickly. I should have seen the writing on the wall. But I didn't, because I had clients. Not just projects, relationships. Accounts I'd grown from fledgling startups to multi-million-dollar partners. People who called me before they called their legal team. Clients who sent me baby shower invites and once FedExed me soup when Leo had the flu. They depended on me. I was their person. So I believed I was safe, more than safe, vital. But Halston Corp wasn't run by people who understood loyalty. They were run by efficiency, by dashboards, by whiteboards filled with names that turned red if they didn't fit the new compensation framework. Dylan, our new CEO, strutted in like a god of disruption. He changed the wallpaper in the lobby before he bothered to learn anyone's name. Within a week, he renamed 3 departments, introduced 5 new acronyms, and replaced the welcome email template with something on-brand. He didn't speak to me until week 4, and even then, it was during a hallway chat where he called me Blair. Still, I kept showing up. Earlier, sharper, faster. I covered for disappearing team members, rewrote launch decks solo, fielded panicked vendor calls when no one else would answer. Then came the restructure. It was announced via an internal newsletter we didn't know we were subscribed to. "Exciting news," the header read. We're realigning to meet the moment. Buried halfway down the email was a list of departments that were being integrated under new verticals. Content strategy was one of them. The name was gone, replaced with growth narrative optimization, whatever that meant. My title didn't exist anymore. I walked straight to Dylan's office. His assistant stalled me for 20 minutes. When I finally got in, he was standing at the window like he expected applause from the skyline. "What happened to my team?" I asked, voice even. He didn't turn. "We're simplifying. You'll report through performance ops now." "That's not a team," I said. He finally looked at me. "It's a vision." I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. The next few weeks were a slow-motion disaster. Emma, my junior strategist, the one I mentored from her first blog brief to owning full campaigns, was let go with 1 day's notice. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't even informed. She called me crying from her car in the parking garage. "They just said I wasn't scalable," she sobbed. I stayed late that night, staring at her empty desk, her cactus still on the windowsill. My client load doubled, then tripled. The shared content team was a rotating door of freelancers who couldn't spell the clients' names right, much less understand their goals. Deadlines loomed like cliffs. I worked through weekends. I canceled Leo's birthday plans because a partner in Boston decided to pivot their narrative approach at the last minute. I kept telling myself it would stabilize, but it didn't. Then came the final blow. I was called into conference room 9B, an icebox of a room no one liked. HR was already there. Dylan stood in the corner, arms folded like a disapproving school principal. A folder with my name sat on the table, crisp and flat. "We appreciate everything you've done," the HR rep began, her voice syrupy with scripted empathy. "But in our current phase of transition, we've identified overlapping functions." I blinked. "I run 3 of your top 5 accounts." "Those clients will be reassigned," she said. "To who?" I asked. She hesitated. "Accounts coordination." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "They've never even met with—" "We're confident in the transition," Dylan said flatly. "But they trust me," I said. "I built those relationships. I saved that revenue after the acquisition. I worked 16-hour days." He cut me off. "This isn't personal, Beatrice." "It's not strategic either," I snapped. "You're letting go of the only person holding your reputation together with those clients." "Your severance is outlined in the packet," HR said gently. I stared at her, then at him. There was so much I wanted to say, but instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a hard copy of a client contract, one I'd printed for backup 2 years ago, and laid it on the table. "Read Clause 11, I said. "It requires continuity of point of contact for high-value contracts. It names me. If you remove me, they can walk. No penalty." Dylan's mouth opened slightly. He hadn't read it. I could see it in his eyes. I leaned forward. "You're not just firing an employee, you're triggering an exodus." I stood, picked up the folder, and walked out. I didn't go back to my desk. I didn't check Slack. I just walked straight to the parking lot, past the lobby where they once hung a photo of my team after we hit our first $5 quarter. It had been replaced by a digital signboard looping brand slogans no one believed in. When I got to my car, I sat for a long time, not crying, just hollow. Then I reached for my phone and dialed the number from the night before. It rang once. Then a voice picked up. "Beatrice," he said, with a warmth I hadn't heard in months. "We've got a seat at the table waiting for you." They didn't fire me, not exactly. I was halfway out the door, folder in hand, dignity like a threadbare coat around my shoulders, when HR called me back. "Wait," the woman said, standing from her chair, one hand raised like she was waving down traffic. "Before you go, we'd like to discuss an alternative." I paused, half because I was curious, half because something in her voice sounded almost smug. Dylan didn't meet my eyes. He stayed against the wall, arms folded, jaw tight. I could tell he wasn't the architect of this part. HR was. "Let's sit," she said, gesturing to the table again. I hesitated, then did. She slid a second folder across the table. This one thinner, less ceremonious. Inside, a single printed page. "We've identified a new opportunity for you within the company," she began, smoothing her skirt like she'd rehearsed the line in a mirror. "One that better aligns with your revised compensation level and our current departmental needs." I looked down at the document. Communications liaison. A fancy way to say catch-all. It came with a salary that was 40% lower than my already cut rate. No direct reports, no budget, no defined KPIs. Just a vague blurb about cross-functional collaboration and internal storytelling facilitation. "You're offering me a demotion," I said flatly. She smiled, the way someone does when they think they're being generous. "We're offering you continuity, in a time when many others aren't so fortunate." I blinked slowly. "Is this what you did with Liam, with Denise?" She tilted her head. "I'm not at liberty to—" "Right," I said, "because none of them lasted more than 3 weeks after taking deals like this." Dylan shifted uncomfortably. "It's a bridge, Beatrice. We're in a transitional phase. This keeps you close to the action." "No," I said. "It keeps me conveniently cheap, quiet, until you don't need me anymore." He shrugged. "That's your interpretation." "It's not an interpretation," I snapped. "It's a pattern." They wanted to bury me under a fake title, strip away the authority I'd earned, mine my knowledge, until someone younger and cheaper could replicate enough of it to replace me. They'd done it to others. And now it was my turn. "So, I built your brand architecture," I said, staring directly at Dylan. "I carried 3 departments through 4 quarters of chaos. And your solution is to reassign me to busy work?" He spread his hands. "You're overreacting." "No," I said, rising from my chair. "I'm finally reacting." HR stood too, trying to regain control. "Beatrice, we hope you'll take some time to consider. There's a deadline, end of the week. After that, the offer expires." Of course there was. Of course this was the part where they gave me the illusion of choice, like I could somehow weigh this insult against my dignity and find it reasonable. I reached for the second folder. Not because I wanted it, but because I wanted the evidence. "I'll think about it," I lied. Dylan gave me a tight smile, like a man who thought he'd neutralized a problem. I turned to go, and then I said, without looking back, "You're going to regret this, not because I'm loud, but because I'm not the only one you underestimated." Back in the hallway, I passed Ben, who raised an eyebrow as I walked by. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He thought he'd won. I stepped into the elevator, the folder still in my hand. My reflection stared back at me in the chrome walls. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, something sharp underneath all of it finally rising. Because what they didn't know, what they had no way of knowing, was that I'd already had a different meeting scheduled, one they'd never be invited to, with people who saw what I was really worth. And tomorrow, I'd walk into a very different kind of office, one where no one dared to offer me a demotion disguised as mercy. The apartment was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the kind that creeps in after something shatters. It was well past midnight, but I couldn't stop pacing the living room. I had opened the HR folder again, some form of masochism maybe, and reread the communications liaison job description for the 5th time. Each line felt like a fresh slap. It didn't matter how they dressed it up with euphemisms. Lateral realignment, internal opportunity, streamlined leadership support. What they were really saying was this: we don't respect you anymore, but we're not done wringing value out of you. The lamp cast a soft glow over the coffee table, where Leo's math homework was still spread out. Crayon marks near the margins, the faint outline of a smiley face he'd drawn when he finally got his subtraction right. I stared at it, and something inside me twisted. This was supposed to be the part of life where things started to feel secure, where I could breathe, where the years of sacrificing and climbing and surviving added up to a kind of peace. But here I was, alone in the dark, with tea gone cold, and no plan. The vibration startled me. Incoming call. Maya C. My heart actually skipped. Maya Chen hadn't called me in almost a year, not since she left PulseSpark with her signature quiet exit. No fanfare, no farewell speech. Just a 2-sentence email and an inbox auto response that never turned off. I stared at the screen for half a second longer, then picked up. Maya? Still awake? She asked, voice smooth, just the right mix of sardonic and concerned. Barely, I said, forcing a breath out. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Well, she said, word gets around, and Dylan's messes are loud, even when they're pretending to be polite. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She always had a sixth sense for when I was bleeding under the armor. You want to talk about it? She asked. I hesitated, but then it all came pouring out. The offer. The new title that meant nothing. The salary so low it would qualify me for a tax bracket I hadn't seen since Leo was in diapers. The clients reassigned without a word. The humiliation. Maya listened in silence, never interrupting, just letting it land. When I finally ran out of breath, she spoke. I figured that's what they'd try, she said. They did the same to my team. Slow erosion until no one recognized their jobs anymore. I leaned against the counter. I should have left sooner. No, she said sharply. Don't go there. You stayed because you believed in the work. Because you thought loyalty meant something. That's not a weakness, Beatrice. That's their failure. That nearly broke me, because I realized then just how badly I'd needed to hear it. Look, she continued, I didn't just call to check in. I have a reason. I sat up straighter. Novaverse is building out a narrative intelligence unit, she said. Real strategy. They're looking for someone who can translate data into voice. Who knows how to lead with insight, not just platforms. I blinked. That's exactly what I do. I know, Maya said. That's why I told them I had someone they needed to talk to. A strange pressure built behind my eyes. The kind of pressure that happens when hope tries to slip through despair. They're Dylan's biggest competitor, I said slowly, which is exactly why they want you. And they know who you are. I didn't name drop, but I didn't have to. Your work speaks. They've seen your campaigns. Your old customer journey map? They use it in internal trainings. I sat in stunned silence. The map she was talking about. I'd created it during one of PulseSpark's tightest quarters. A visualization of user behavior that predicted churn 2 months out. It had saved us $500,000 in losses. No one ever acknowledged it in a meeting. They're interested, Maya said. They're moving fast. I can set up a call with the VP of Brand Innovation tomorrow. I looked out the window. The city was still humming, lights flickering across buildings where people were still dreaming or waking up, or maybe, like me, trying to decide who they wanted to be when the sun rose. I don't want another job, I said softly. I want a chance to fix this, to take my power back. Maya didn't hesitate. Then this is your shot. It hit me all at once. This wasn't a ladder. This was a lever, not just a way out, but a way up. Set the call, I said. My voice didn't shake. Let's see if they're ready for what I'm bringing. She let out a small, satisfied sigh. Now that's the Beatrice I remember. After we hung up, I stayed at the table a little longer. Not because I was stuck, but because, for the first time in weeks, I could feel the ground shifting again. Only this time, it was moving in my favor. The email from Novaverse hit my inbox at exactly 8:03 a.m., down to the minute from the one I received just a few days earlier from Halston Corp. Except this time, the tone was different. Crisp, decisive. No hedging, no generic language. It was from someone named Devin Wu, their chief of talent integration. The subject line read, Formal offer, Director of Strategic Brand Intelligence. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit. I took a sip of my coffee, brushed Leo's hair while he munched his cereal, and answered 3 school permission slips. Only after he was out the door with his backpack bouncing against his shoulders did I return to my laptop. I clicked. The first thing I noticed was the layout of the contract. It was beautifully organized. Whoever wrote it respected time and clarity, two qualities sorely missing at Halston Corp. I downloaded the document, printed it, and laid it flat on the kitchen table, right where I used to fold Leo's onesies. I took out a pen. This time, I wasn't reading as someone desperate to keep a job. I was reading as someone reclaiming her terms. The role, Director of Strategic Brand Intelligence, reporting directly to the VP of Innovation. Team of 6, multi-market oversight. An annual budget line that made my pulse quicken, in a good way. The salary? Competitive, substantial. But what struck me most was the acknowledgement of value. It was less about the number and more about how it was positioned. No bonuses tied to impossible KPIs. No vague company performance benchmarks. Just transparent compensation for proven expertise. Equity? Yes. With clear vesting terms and quarterly reporting access. A seat at the table, not crumbs from it. Page 6 detailed expectations, measurable, achievable, and written in a way that assumed competence, not suspicion. Page 7, benefits, relocation flexibility, hybrid work options. Then I hit page 8. Non-compete clause, not included. I froze. I reread the page 3 times. It wasn't just missing. It had been deliberately removed. A footnote confirmed it. We believe our culture and opportunities speak for themselves. We don't rely on restrictions to keep talent. We invest in creating reasons to stay. I put the pen down. The air shifted. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I was being treated like someone whose mind was an asset, not a cost. I wasn't being trapped, manipulated, or handled. I was being invited. By the time I finished the review, I knew. This wasn't just a lifeline. This was a door opening into the version of my career I thought had passed me by. At 9:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A sleek sedan waited outside. I climbed in, my heels tapping quietly on the pavement, folder in hand. The driver greeted me by name, already knew the route, and offered me water. I said yes, mostly out of surprise. As the city flew past the windows, I thought about everything that had led me here. The overnights, the campaigns, the skipped dinners and early mornings. I thought about how many times I'd convinced myself to hang in just a little longer. How many red flags I'd rationalized in the name of loyalty. How many toxic smiles I'd smiled back at because the rent was due. The building was a clean cut of glass and steel. Novaverse headquarters. No gold plaques. No oversized sculptures. Just precision and presence. Inside, a receptionist directed me to the 18th floor, where an assistant named Lena welcomed me with a soft, "We've been expecting you, Miss Tran." Not, "Can I see your ID?" Not, "Who are you here to see?" "We've been expecting you." She led me to a corner conference room. It was warm, filled with natural light, and tastefully minimal. A wall-length whiteboard held half-drawn diagrams, sticky notes arranged in neat rows. This was a space where thinking happened, real thinking. And then he walked in. Jason Arlo, Novaverse's CEO. I'd seen his photo on tech blogs, often labeled the quiet builder. He wasn't flashy, didn't believe in disruption for its own sake. He wore a dark sweater, no tie, and walked like someone who was used to being listened to. "Beatrice," he said, extending his hand, "we finally meet." I shook it, firm, calm, grounded. "I've been following your work for years," he said as we sat. "Not just your campaigns, the frameworks behind them, the architecture." "I didn't think anyone noticed," I said before I could stop myself. Jason smiled. "The right people always notice, eventually." He didn't waste time. No small talk about weather or commutes. "We don't need a face, we need a mind. We're building a different kind of brand narrative team, one that can cut through noise and build long-term trust. You don't just speak to customers, you build belief systems. That's what we want." I stared at him, stunned into stillness. "I read your case study on the Q4 retention strategy," he continued. "It was brilliant. Most teams panic when churn spikes. You anticipated it. Redirected tone, restructured timing. That's pattern recognition. That's power. I didn't respond immediately. I was still absorbing the shift in gravity. You'll have room to lead here, he said. Real room. No fake titles. No phantom promotions. I don't want you fighting for air. I want you building the house. I finally found my voice. What if I say yes? Jason leaned back in his chair. Then we get to work. Together. I reached for the folder beside me. I have notes, some thoughts on the structure. He smiled again. Even better. And just like that, for the first time in years, I was no longer surviving. I was steering. Jason Arlo pushed the folder across the table with quiet finality. He didn't oversell it, didn't rattle off numbers or talk up titles. He just watched me, calm and certain, like he already knew what it meant to hand someone back their power. I opened it with careful fingers, bracing for a number that would be generous, but diplomatic. That's what I was used to. Just enough to say, we see you, but never enough to change the room you were allowed to enter. But this was something else entirely. The base salary alone made my breath catch. It wasn't just higher than what Halston Corp had paid me at my peak. It was higher than what Dylan made, if I was guessing right. And then there were the bonuses, quarterly performance, equity milestones, cross-departmental impact rewards. A full executive leadership pathway, clearly charted, with a review window in 18 months for VP candidacy. I flipped the page. There it was. The discretionary innovation budget, a line item with my name already attached. Jason had mentioned it briefly, but seeing it in writing was something else. A quarterly reserve to use at my discretion, whether for team hires, tech tools, or experimental campaigns. No micromanaging, no four-layer approval process. They weren't just hiring me to execute, they were hiring me to lead. I kept reading. Dedicated executive coach, if I wanted it. Thought leadership publishing support. Invitations to strategic offsites. And, buried in the fine print, the company would sponsor Leo's tuition at any STEM summer program of his choosing, up to $5,000 per year. I blinked hard. Jason's voice broke through the thick quiet. We believe that when people are valued, they create their best work. When they're exhausted, afraid, or managed like threats, they shrink. We don't want you to shrink here. My hands were still resting on the folder, but something inside me had shifted. This isn't just generous, I said slowly. It's intentional. Jason nodded. We've watched your career from a distance for longer than you know. When your name came up in a strategy meeting last year, someone from our data team said, she's the one who finds structure in chaos. She sees the logic in panic. That hit me like a gut punch in the best way. How do you even track this? I asked. I've been told most of what I do is invisible. It is, he said. To the wrong people. But the right ones? We see exactly how dangerous you are, in the best sense of the word. I laughed, stunned. You're going to make me cry. Jason's smile softened. Cry later, decide now. He tapped the folder. We'd like you to start within 2 weeks. You name the date. It wasn't even a question anymore. For years, I'd bent over backwards for roles that barely acknowledged I had a spine. I had apologized for taking up space, diminished myself to stay palatable, watered down ideas to make insecure executives feel important. And now here was a company that wanted me bigger, louder, more dangerous. I looked up at him and closed the folder. I'm in, I said, voice clear. Jason reached across the table and shook my hand. Not as a formality, as an equal. Welcome to Novaverse, Beatrice. I stood. My legs were steady, my heart strangely calm. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to be. As I rode the elevator down, I stared at my reflection in the polished chrome. I looked the same, but something had changed, something in my posture, my jaw, the quiet fire in my eyes. I stepped into the car, waiting outside. The driver greeted me like a VIP. As we pulled away from the curb, I finally allowed myself a smile. Because I hadn't just landed a new job. I'd been invited into the big game, and this time, I wasn't showing up with hope in my heart and a folder of talking points. This time, I was holding the cards. I didn't return to Halston Corp to get closure. I returned to mark the end properly, with precision, with truth, with dignity that couldn't be repackaged or reduced. It was a clear Tuesday morning, the kind of day that used to begin with strategy meetings and end with late-night slide edits. But today, I walked through those glass doors not as the desperate woman they thought they had cornered, but as someone who'd been handed the blueprint to something far better. The receptionist barely recognized me at first. I wasn't wearing my usual muted tones. I wore navy blue, sharp, clean, commanding. No lanyard, no laptop bag. Just a leather folder in one hand and a quiet purpose in my step. As I stepped into the elevator, a junior product manager I once mentored stepped in behind me. He gave me a startled look. "You're back?" "Briefly," I said. "Finishing something." He didn't press further. The elevator pinged open at the 10th floor. I nodded once and stepped out. Dylan's assistant blinked when she saw me. "Beatrice, I didn't have you on the schedule." "I'm not here for a meeting," I said simply. "Just 5 minutes?" "I'm not sure he'll want to hear what I have to say." I didn't wait. I walked straight into Dylan's office, door swinging quietly behind me. He was mid-call, but when he saw me, he froze. "Gotta call you back," he muttered into the receiver, then stood. "Beatrice, I wasn't expecting—" "No, you weren't," I said, placing the folder on his desk with a steady hand. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Please, sit." "I won't be long." He paused, then nodded, slowly lowering himself back into his chair. "I'm officially resigning," I said, sliding the letter across. "Effective immediately." There was a flicker, an instinct to control his reaction, but he masked it quickly. "We regret to see you go," he said in his most rehearsed tone. "We had hoped you'd considered the lateral transition. There's room to grow there." I gave a quiet, almost amused exhale. "You offered me a title without authority, a salary that would have been insulting 10 years ago, and tasks that don't align with any of my strategic expertise. That wasn't a transition. That was containment." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand gently to stop him. I've done my homework," I continued. "You'll find in that folder an annotated version of my employment agreement. Not only is there no non-compete clause, you failed to update the conflict of interest disclosures after your own policy overhaul last quarter, which means legally you have no grounds to block or penalize my transition elsewhere." His jaw tensed. "You're making assumptions." "No," I said evenly. "I'm making citations." I reached into the folder again and pulled out another sheet. "This," I said, laying it flat, "is an internal Halston Corp memo, filed by your operations director, detailing the plan to outsource a majority of our legacy account services to an overseas contractor network by Q3. His face changed. Cold. Still. "This memo," I continued, "was leaked by someone in your own department who saw what you were doing to people like Emma, like Priya, like me. People you gutted in silence. The plan was to let us fade out while you handed over our roles to cheaper teams offshore, without alerting clients. That document is internal and not covered under an NDA," I finished. "Your new HR policy dropped automatic confidentiality from general memos unless explicitly marked. This one wasn't. You left it wide open." He swallowed. Hard. "This is a legal powder keg waiting to happen," I said calmly. "I'm not threatening you. I'm stating the obvious. If even one of those high-value clients finds out you're outsourcing white-glove strategy under the table, your quarter implodes." Dylan stood now, arms folded, trying to regain some posture of control. "Where are you going?" I smiled. "Just a little." "Somewhere that values what I build." "Novaverse?" he asked, voice tight. "I never said that." "But they've been circling," he said bitterly. "I heard rumors, thought they'd wait." "They didn't." Silence settled. For the first time, he seemed to really see me, not the version of me he'd sidelined, but the strategist who had survived him. "You think they'll let you lead?" he said. "Startups talk big, but—" "They already did," I interrupted. "Full authority, strategic direction, my own innovation fund." I placed the final page on the desk. "My clients, the ones you thought you could reassign? They reached out. Turns out they weren't loyal to your logo. They were loyal to me." His eyes flickered. "3 of them are requesting transitions as of this morning. You'll see the emails." I turned to leave. And then I stopped. "I want you to understand something," I said without turning around. "You didn't break me. You revealed me." And then I walked out. Not quickly, not triumphantly, just steadily, like a woman who'd finally stepped back into her own life. As I passed through the lobby, the receptionist gave me a small wave. I returned it. The elevator doors closed behind me, sealing off a chapter that had tried so hard to swallow me whole. But it hadn't. I hadn't just left that place behind. I had outgrown it. Power doesn't always look like a press conference or a dramatic exit speech. Sometimes it looks like a string of phone calls, one after another. By noon the next day, it was already clear. The clients had noticed. Not just because I was gone, but because Halston Corp hadn't bothered to tell them. They'd tried to slip it past everyone, hoping no one would look too closely. But my absence was like pulling the keystone from an arch. It didn't just go unnoticed, it broke the structure. The first call came from Melissa, the COO of GliderPay, a client I'd helped pull through their Series B disaster with nothing but a pivot deck, 3 sleepless nights, and a single revised customer lifecycle model. We'd built something together, and she remembered. "Beatrice," she said, skipping any preamble, "what the hell is going on?" "I'm no longer with Halston Corp," I said, keeping my voice measured. "Why didn't we get notified?" They forwarded me a new contact, someone named Mark, who doesn't even know how our pricing model works. I asked him a question about retention segments, and he told me to circle back next quarter. I nearly threw my laptop. I said nothing, but my silence said enough. Melissa took a breath. "Where are you? Tell me who poached you. Because if you're taking meetings, I want one. I can't confirm anything right now." She exhaled sharply, then added, "Just know, if you start a new chapter and there's a seat at the table, I'm following." Before I could even put down my phone, 2 more emails rolled in. Then came the call from Randall, a partner at a biotech firm I'd supported through a branding overhaul during one of their most vulnerable quarters. "I just got off the phone with Dylan," he said. "He told me you'd transitioned internally. Is that true?" "No," I said bluntly. "It's not." There was a beat of silence. "I knew it," he said. I could feel it in the way he spoke, like he was covering a burn with a napkin. "Beatrice, we're not staying. My CMO already pulled our renewal review. Let me know when you're ready. We'd rather wait for your new seat than stay in a mess we can't trust." That afternoon, I got 6 more calls, clients whispering like it was a conspiracy, because that's how Halston Corp had made them feel. Like my departure was something to be hidden. But truth finds its way out. And then, Dylan called. I almost ignored it, but something inside me knew this was the final stone that needed lifting. "Beatrice," he said the moment I picked up, "we need to talk. Please don't hang up." I leaned against my kitchen counter, one eye on Leo's half-finished art project on the table. "I'm listening," I said. "We're seeing real client fallout," he began. "Multiple renewals delayed, several escalations to senior management, and it's all tied to your name." "That's not surprising," I said. "They were loyal. You just didn't think they were loyal to me." He tried to steer the conversation. "We understand we miscalculated, but we're prepared to correct course. You were always an asset. We just got swept up in operational changes. I'll be honest with you. The financial pressure is mounting. We're offering you a full counter package. Name your number." I could almost hear the Excel sheets in his head, scrambling to adjust. But he didn't get it. He still didn't get it. "It's not about the money anymore," I said softly. Then what is it? He asked, frustrated. Pride? You made your point. It's about agency, I said. About being somewhere I don't have to earn the right to be respected every quarter. Somewhere that doesn't use words like efficiency to cover betrayal. We'll restructure your role, he pressed. Put you in a client retention leadership track. You can build your own team. Choose your accounts. I paused. No, Dylan. You had your chance. His tone shifted. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I'm correcting one. And I ended the call. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. Just resolved. Like something in me had finally snapped into place. That night, I sat on the balcony with my laptop, finalizing my Novaverse onboarding paperwork, while Leo built a Lego spaceship beside me. The wind was picking up. I could smell a storm in the distance, but for once, it didn't scare me. Because now, I wasn't at the mercy of someone else's weather system. I was building my own. And when the industry looked up, they were going to see me standing in the eye of it. I started at Novaverse on a Monday. There was no grand welcome party, no performative tour with executives awkwardly shaking hands. What I got instead was something better, a sense of trust, a belief in my capability so implicit it didn't need to be announced. My office was still being finalized, but the desk they gave me overlooked the skyline. And for the first time in years, I saw the city not as something towering over me, but something I was now aligned with. Equal to. The team Jason promised, already assembled, smart, underrated, people who'd been told not yet too many times. We clicked fast, like puzzle pieces that had been scattered across departments for too long. I didn't waste time. Day 1. I met with my direct reports individually, not to hand out orders, but to listen. Really listen. By the end of the first week, I had redesigned the core communication funnel and identified 3 inefficiencies that had cost the company thousands in content delays. Not flashy fixes, foundational ones. And people noticed. Emails started pouring in from other departments. Heard what you're building. Can we collaborate? Jason mentioned your onboarding deck in leadership. Can I see it? But the biggest shift didn't come from within. It came from the outside. 3 days after I started, I got an email from Emma. One line, they pushed me out, again. If there's space, I'm yours. Of course there was. She joined within 2 weeks. And when she arrived, she didn't just pick up where she left off. She flourished. At Halston Corp, they'd micromanaged her into silence. At Novaverse, she ran a full analytics revamp by the end of month 1. Next came Priya, then Ben from Brand Ops, then Tasha from Product Strategy. Each left Halston Corp behind like shedding old skin. They didn't even flinch. They'd seen what it looked like to be valued, and there was no going back. And the clients? They followed like gravity. Melissa from GliderPay was first. She sent a legal request to reassign her contract in accordance with newly adjusted trust priorities. She didn't even bother with pretense. Then Randall. Then 3 mid-market firms I'd built campaign strategies for in the dark days of Q4 2022. One by one they called. Not out of pity, out of conviction. We want someone who understands our voice, they said. We want someone who builds things that last. Halston Corp scrambled. They tried to spin my exit as a personal transition, posted on LinkedIn about team evolution and brand agility. But the industry knew. Whispers spread, first in Slack channels, then at mixers, then in quarterly wrap-ups that asked the question no one at Halston Corp wanted to answer. Why are the good ones leaving? Internal Slack screenshots leaked. A crisis cohesion initiative failed within a week. HR issued vague culture audits. Someone leaked Dylan's memo on transitional exits, and it went viral in a not good way. But I didn't engage, not even when a journalist reached out anonymously for comment, because the victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in my peace. Now I end my workday by 6. Not always, but most days. Leo and I cook dinner together. Sometimes pancakes, sometimes grilled cheese, sometimes just cereal and giggles. He asks me questions about my job, And I tell him stories, not about deadlines or bad meetings, but about solving things, fixing puzzles, making people feel seen. We light candles at dinner now, just because. I don't check my phone while we eat. I don't work through bedtime anymore. I read to him, real books, ones I used to be too tired to finish. And after he's asleep, I sit on the balcony with tea, not to plan, not to worry, just to be. And sometimes I think about everything that came before. The meetings where I swallowed my voice, the folders they handed me like ultimatums, the feeling of being slowly erased. And I don't feel rage. I feel release, because they no longer get to define me, not my path, not my worth, not my legacy. I do. And the people who once overlooked me, they're watching now. But it doesn't matter, because I didn't win by fighting back. I won by walking forward. And I'm not stopping. If you've made it this far, maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you've sat in a meeting where your worth was quietly diminished by people who needed you small. Maybe you've worked late for a company that forgot your name the moment you left the room. Maybe you've whispered, "It's just temporary," so many times you started to believe it. Here's what I've learned. 1. Loyalty without reciprocity is exploitation. If they only value you when you're silent, compliant, or afraid to leave, that's not loyalty. That's control. Real loyalty is mutual. It grows where respect lives. 2. Titles are illusions. Impact is real. They can call you anything they want, but the work you do, the clients you save, the teams you grow, the value you create, that speaks louder than any title they hand out to keep you quiet. 3. You are allowed to outgrow people, places, and roles, especially the ones that once saved you, especially the ones that now drain you. Staying somewhere that stifles you isn't noble. It's a slow erosion of self. 4. Revenge is overrated. Self-respect isn't. You don't need to burn bridges. Just stop carrying the weight of them. Walk your new path with grace, not spite. That's the kind of revenge they never see coming. 5. Peace is the true prize. It's not the job offer, not the title, not the applause. It's the quiet knowledge that you no longer have to shrink to survive, that your voice fits your body now, that your life belongs to you again. So if you're reading this on a bad day or a breaking point, know this. You don't have to be anyone's best-kept secret. You can leave. You can build something better. And when you do, you won't just find a new job. You'll find yourself.